The other day we talked about Black Ops 4 having a huge update this week, and well, Treyarch did not disappoint. Earlier in the day, we got the biggest update to drop for Black Ops 4 yet. I'm talking 11 gigabytes on PlayStation 4, just over 12 gigabytes on Xbox One, and PCs is still to follow, coming live tomorrow. But with that, we ended up getting a ton of things adjusted, a ton of things added in, and a lot of weapon balancing that is honestly a complete overhaul from a lot of what we already currently know. While some things are bigger than others, today we're gonna break down everything that really changed within this update 1.04 to Black Ops 4 that dropped earlier in the day. So sit back and relax, because we have so much to talk about, and I'm gonna try and breeze through as much as possible in as timely manner as possible, but fair warning, this one might be a little longer than our standard update videos that we do here on the channel. But let's just jump right into it. So the first thing that you'll be met with when you finally jump into Black Ops 4 after what may be a long time downloading, because it is a hefty file size, you'll be greeted with that first opening selection screen where you have multiplayer, blackout, as well as zombies. Now, there's a little bit of a change here that you'll see right off the bat. You now have a brand new featured playlist and the introduction of Gun Game right above multiplayer. Solos is the featured playlist for Blackout, which I'm curious as to when we'll get our first limited time mode added in, but I digress. That is something that you'll see those two, and of course your standard zombies as well. But when you jump in, Gun Game again was that added for the featured playlist. This will be around until November 6th, so 1 week, and it seems like we're gonna be continually getting new updates every single week for a new featured playlist, which is very cool. It keeps everything on a regular cycle through content, though Gun Game is one, of course, I'm sure a lot of people want to see stay throughout the year. So as for how long it'll stay, we don't exactly know, but you do have it right now as the featured playlist for 1 week's time. As for other playlist adjustments, we now see that we have the Mercenary Deathmatch Mosh Pit, which is a swap from the Capture Mosh Pit that we had as of the past week. And this again is no teams, all solos, and it's just in TDM and kill confirmed this time. So I'm happy there's still playlists for solo players and it wasn't just a 1 week only thing. So maybe we'll see that on rotation as well. But we also see that we have something of Chaos Domination, which is a brand new introduction and slight variation of domination that we know of right now. But I think it's a really cool addition. It's 6v6 and it has a score limit of 300 score instead of 200, so you now have each round going up to 150. You also have faster capture times, which is only 3 seconds compared to what it normally is. So a little faster, and of course, probably a little bit more chaotic, a little more hectic of gameplay. It's a cool little variation of what we already know as the classic spin on domination, but fair warning, I can almost guarantee there's gonna be 6-mans galore within this all week. But that is one of the other featured playlists here with this, and as for the final thing in terms of playlist, we have Hardcore, TDM, and Kill Confirmed now having 6v6 and 2 specialists per team play. So essentially Chaos Mosh Pit came to Hardcore. But that's always awesome, and I know that's something that a lot of people, myself included, would have loved to see 6v6 play in Hardcore, but that's now an option. So feel free to jump into that. As for the big beefy part of this update in terms of multiplayer, there was a ton of weapon tuning. On a top-down level, it wasn't so much an insane buff to everything, but instead a lot of things were more so equaled out, and one big area of discussion is the rifles. The SMGs weren't necessarily buffed to the point where they are brought up to where they are in line with AR play, but instead rifles were kind of toned back a little bit and dialed back to previous versions of those builds to kind of bridge the gap between those two levels of play. But again, there are adjustments made across the board. So as for the ICR, we see that the headshot damage was reduced, and also there was a slight speed reduction for reload speed, so it's a little clunkier now when you take a look at it to where it was compared as of yesterday and before. The Vapor XKG, or VAPR XKG, had a reduction of the close range headshot damage, and then damage fall off is actually closer, so it's not as effective at range. And then specifically for the high caliber attachment, it reduced the headshot multiplier, and it no longer allows for a 3-hit kill. Now, we'll talk about the high caliber attachment in a couple of different places here through these patch notes, but I feel like if you're getting 3 headshots in a row, that should be something that kills the enemy, but I guess we'll see how it plays and how it shifts the meta, if at all, and if there's any noticeable delay when you go into it in game. As for the SMGs, this is where we start to see a lot of different adjustments. As for the SMGs from a top-down perspective, all mobility properties for weapons were baselined and now have these same mobility properties. Some weapons were excelling a little further than other SMGs, but now they're all in line with each other. The MX-9 in particular had an extension at all damage ranges, so over range it's now better compared to where it was before. And again, for that high caliber attachment, it reduced that headshot multiplier, getting rid of the 4-hit kill potential. The Cordite was one that was also adjusted. It had an extension at all ranges as well for damage, and the belt-fed operator mod in particular had an increased overheat rate, so it's not as effective as it was, which makes sense because it was insanely good with that belt-fed operator mod. The GKS was one that had the quad shot operator mod adjusted. This has a slight time increase between the bursts, so a tad bit more delay than previously. The SOG 9mm had a much needed nerf to this, in which the dual wield operator mod got the nerf of the hipfire accuracy. That was reduced, so I think this is the right call on this one. If you popped a laser on those, the dual wields, you wouldn't miss a shot, and you could nearly run through anyone, no matter what, if they were in that close to medium range engagement. Now, as for the tactical rifles, this is where we start to see a lot of changes with the ABR in particular, simply because it wasn't as competitive as the other rifles as compared to the Auger DMR as well as the Swordfish. So there was an extension to the max damage range, which is a buff over distance for the ABR and its shots. The repeater operator mod actually got an adjustment here as well. This was actually nerfed, which is kind of weird when you think about buffing the ABR over the grand scheme of things. This now takes longer to accelerate the fire, so it's not as quick to go into it. It was, I think, about 3 to 4 bursts before it was full auto whenever you held down the trigger with the repeater operator mod, but it's no longer ungodly OP, which again is kind of okay to me. It was ridiculous in the beta and early days of the game. So from the design intent in trying to remove that operator mod as a crutch attachment, I think they did a decent job here at this one. The stock had a reduction in movement speed bonus, but not by much. As for the laser sight 1 and 2, that also had an improved hipfire accuracy. But then onto the Swordfish, this had again another high caliber nerf. It reduced the headshot multiplier and removed the chance of a 3-hit kill, which again, I don't know if I necessarily agree with, but that's what we have at the moment. The Pentaburst operator mod also was slightly toned down a bit. It has a reduction in the extra granted clip size, which isn't all that much compared to what it could be, but still a slight nerf to the operator mod of the Swordfish. As for the snipers, it was kind of an overall buff across the board to the other snipers outside of the Paladin. That's kind of the gold standard right now for Treyarch, as the Paladin still stands to reign supreme amongst the others in terms of both just straight up power and also what people end up using. So as for the Paladin itself, in what was adjusted for this one, there's a slight nerf to the Paladin for High Caliber 2, which no longer grants a 1-hit kill on a TAC 5 boosted enemy with 200 HP when hit in the lower torso. As you guys know, High Caliber does extend that extra damage multiplier downward on the body, but with Crash's TAC 5 boosting to 200 HP, it's no longer a 1-hit now as a result. FMJ now does more damage against streaks on the Paladin, but not against players through armor and all things like that, but streaks in particular. And finally, Stabilizer 2 on the Paladin, players can hold their breath sooner after their last breath holding, so the cooldown time with that is a little bit adjusted. As for the Outlaw, we saw a base damage buff that's now up from 110 to 130 with the first initial shot, and it has reduced idle sway, an increase to the base movement speed, and the stock attachment got a slight increase in ADS movement speed. The SDM had a slight adjustment here in which the magazine size is increased from 10 shots to 12 shots, and again has a reduced idle sway, so only a slight buff, but a buff no less. And finally, the Koshka has an improved damage from 120 to 140, with a stock attachment getting a slight buff to the ADS movement speed as well. And truthfully, I'm pretty happy with these sniper buffs because I'm hitting those up next for diamonds, so thanks Treyarch for making those challenges probably a little more bearable. As for LMGs, we saw slight nerfs around the board. The Titan and the VKM were the big targets of those nerfs. The Titan had a reduced headshot damage and hipfire accuracy, as well as a reduction in the ADS movement speed with the stock attachment. The VKM had a reduction to the movement speed when firing, reduction in damage, and a reduction on the tracer size of the operator mod bullets for the Fat Barrel. The Hades had an adjustment to the crossbar operator mod in which it reduced the movement speed and accuracy, as well as the steady grip had an improvement to the recoil mitigation. As for pistols, there was a slight reduction in ADS in transition speed for all pistols across the board, plus the RK7 Garrison had a slight increase to the time between bursts, as well as a slight reduction to the reload speed, so a minimal nerf to the RK7 Garrison. Shotguns, they mentioned, were close to where they want them to be, but with specific attachments performing better than intended, they got a little bit of an adjustment as well. So the MOG 12 saw a reduction to the 1-hit kill range with the choked barrel attachment, as well as the Dragon's Breath operator mod had a resolution with an issue where the Dragon's Breath would occasionally trigger incorrect visuals and sound effects on targets. The SG-12, the strobe light operator mod, actually had an issue addressed with the strobe light would remain on after death, which of course can be rather annoying. As well as Treyarch mentioned that there will be a reduction at range with the strobe light where it interferes with enemy range. That's gonna be coming in a live playlist update shortly. Attachments got a slight adjustment as well. The biggest one out of this is the Grip 2 attachment across the board had reduced ADS flinch mitigation, meaning that it won't be as much of a laser pointer as it was at range compared to what it was previously. And if you saw any of the videos here up on the channel, the ICR with Grip 2 attached was actually unfair. It was a laser pointer at any range. Some of the optics also got reductions and increases in the recoil that they add to the weapon, but other than that, that's pretty much it for the attachments. Now let's talk about specialists, because there's been quite a bit done to specialists, and we'll start with Ajax. They're reevaluating still some of the live environments of how Ajax will perform in the future, but right now, explosives now do partial damage to the front of the deployed ballistic shield user. As well, the ballistic shield now takes longer to earn. Nomad had the K9 unit's health reduced by 10%, but right now that's all that was available there, and is the only change at the current point. Crash was a little bit of a score streak farmer, so whenever now people pick up the assault pack, it now grants 25 points instead of 50 points where it did previously. Firebreak is actually going to probably be a new main meta specialist because the Purifier is now back to where it was in being insanely good. It now again lets the Purifier's flame to be guaranteed an eventual kill against a player who doesn't have Tac Mask equipped. So whether or not that means if you're touched once like in Black Ops 3 you're done for, or if it's just progressive where you have to be there for 2 or 3 ticks of the damage, we don't exactly know, but it sure sounds like that first one. So keep in mind what Purifier may be able to do in multiplayer when you go up against him. Recon got a slight nerf, which kind of bummed about. Rest in peace to my Recon main, perhaps. But there was a reduction in the sensor dart duration. As for the Vision Pulse, there wasn't anything changed with that, but one also thing that I'm so happy got resolved was an issue where anytime you shot a sensor dart, if it went away because of time, you get a voiceover saying that enemies destroyed your sensor dart. Because no, they didn't destroy my sensor dart. It just went away, man. One of those just slight OCD things where you're like, why does this bother me? Torque actually got a slight buff in which there was an increase to the earn rate for the barricade, and also the hit points done by the front of the barricade were increased as well, so they deal a little more damage. Kind of interesting to me because I felt like that did a decent amount of damage to begin with. Prophet had a slight increase as well in buff to this one, in which it increased the projectile speed of the Tempest shot, as well as the chain distance for enemies that may run into an already stunned or downed enemy was increased as well. Spawns also were fixed out a little bit, and some added logic was added into how the system works. TDM, Domination, Hardpoint, Free-for-all, and Control were the subjects of this pass-through of spawn adjustments. We end up seeing the main primary targets are the maps of Slums, Summit, Militia, and Firing Range, with other ones such as Icebreaker, Contraband, Hacienda, Payload, and Gridlock being focused in Domination, and also Frequency and Seaside being adjusted in Hardpoint on top of all those other ones we already mentioned that are across the board. So some spawn logic and some things that prevent players from maybe getting into those spawns a little further have been added in, so definitely nice. I feel like spawn trapping has been some of the worst it's been, but maybe that's just me in the moment being frustrated with the inability to move out of spawn sometimes. Some other additional smaller things, Stim Shot had a slight nerf to it in which it takes a little longer to fully heal the player that uses it. Acoustic Sensor was once again reduced with the range that sprinting enemies are now detected. We saw that there was a slight reduction recently to which the overall ability to pick up people wasn't as far at range, but now sprinting was slightly dialed back as well. Perks like Dead Silence reduced the player movement volume and distance that you'd be picked up on the Acoustic Sensor. And one big one for players that may go for streaks all the time, the Strike Team no longer counts toward your nuclear streak. That's something that has to be gun kills now, which is unfortunate, but does make sense in the grand scheme of things. One final thing that I'll mention on the multiplayer side of things is that Theater actually got a hardcore overhaul. Right now, if there's anything that is in your theater before this update, unfortunately, it won't be able to be viewed because architecturally, the entire system had, again, this massive overhaul to it. Now, they haven't said anything in terms of if this will help playback because I had a ton of errors where it would either crash my game or it wouldn't record past a certain point. They haven't said anything on this just yet, and I haven't gone in and tested enough clips out just yet to end up giving you that information accurately, but they also added in a watermark on the HUD that only displays in theater mode, which is kind of strange to me, but from their perspective and intent with this, it actually makes sense. They they made it to almost prevent propaganda, if you want to put it that way, because they saw a bunch of people posting on socials how the hit detection was so bad, but it was clips from theater mode, which if you guys have paid attention to theater in any of the capacities over the past couple of years in Treyarch games, theater is almost never an accurate representation of what actually happens in-game and in real time. It's just playback and completely different. So that is why that little watermark was added in, but structurally the overall integrity seems to hopefully have been increased as well to theater mode. The final thing we'll talk about here in this video before we wrap it up, because again, this is getting very long, is Blackout. Some quick notes here with this is that 100-player solo lobbies are now the featured playlist. The max player count for duos and quads now is 88 players, so it's kind of swapping around those max player counts that we've seen previously. Audio was a big thing focused here at this one, in which they tweaked settings to ensure that friendly teammate audio is now quieter than enemy footsteps, which is absolutely massive. There also was an issue fixed out where footsteps were entirely silent. Nobody's footsteps, whether enemy or teammates, would register for that person affected by that bug. Armor now allows for more damage through your chest and head, so headshots are definitely more crucial now more than ever against level 3 armor. And the final big, awesome, cool thing to me is that the specialist character missions are now completely unlocked. Previously, you had 1 and then you unlocked 3 more, and then after you got those final 3, which gave you a total of 4 in those specialists, it actually locked. You didn't have any more available, but now they're all opened up. So you now have Battery, Firebreak, Nomad, Prophet, Rune, and Seraph on top of what you already had previously. And a quick little mention for zombies, a lot of the integrity seems to have been changed out, and a lot of the updates made so that games don't crash, people don't lose Easter egg progress, all that good stuff, which is of course absolutely brilliant. In terms of some housekeeping stuff that doesn't have to do with anything listed, some things that I've already seen in game that aren't a part of these patch notes. First thing being, tier accelerators are now showcased in your after action report for the black market. So you'll be able to see more accurately how close you are to the next tier. And then also you end up having the black market icon actually accessible from the in-game lobby, with when you enter that, you actually have a reserve icon now present on the items you've already received. You can see which ones actually came from reserves and which ones came from the pass itself. The lobby countdown timer is available in all menus, so you'll be able to check out how much time is available if you're, say, creating a class, if you're in the black market, wherever it may be. It'll have 10 plus for if it's above, naturally, and then when it counts down, you'll see the 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So it'll give you an accurate representation of how much time you have before the match, even if you're not looking at the menu. There also are, for those of you guys that have made it all the way up to Prestige Master already, for each level that you end up getting, 100, 200, 300, and so on, up until level 1000, you now have custom prestige icons like in Black Ops 3. So very cool to see those return. And the final thing that honestly I'm gunning for, I'm not entirely sure if I like it just yet more than what we had with the original version, but Dark Matter actually got changed. You now have your still red galaxy type of feel for the base default. You have some changes for the different variations for kill streaks, but when you get that nuclear streak, that 30 kill streak, it actually goes back to the legacy Dark Matter from Black Ops 3. The original Dark Matter returns within Black Ops 4. So very cool to see that kind of come back, but you got to get up to that 30 kill streak for it. But ultimately, again, that's where we're going to wrap it up. We're going to call it here. I'll leave the full links down there in the description below to the entirety of the patch notes. Some things we did breeze over and some we covered in detail, but I'll leave everything down there in the description below for you guys. But truly, thank you guys for sticking around this far if you've made it. Hopefully, guys, enjoy this patch. Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. Are you guys a fan of what we've seen so far? Were you hoping for a little bit more? Whatever it is, let me know your thoughts. If you enjoyed the video, though, make sure you drop a like down below. Subscribe to the channel if you guys are new and want to stay up to date with all things news, updates, tips, tricks, best class setups, information, all that good stuff on Black Ops 4 regarding multiplayer, Blackout, zombies, you name it, we got you covered. So hit that subscribe button so you don't miss a single thing. If you guys also want to follow me over on Twitter and Instagram, those are the best places to get connected from outside of YouTube. Practically live on both those, so check them out. Links in the description below. Finally, though, thank you so much for watching. I'll see you guys later. Modest and Espresso, take care, and peace.